Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julie Flakstad, and this is the Midlife Truth Project, a special 9-part series aimed at unraveling the myriad of transitions that women face as we approach and settle into midlife. For those new to this series, it's an audio journey where all the conversations build off each other. For example, we intentionally chose to cover today's theme on changing family dynamics after we talked about hormones and menopause, because let's be honest, right? How we feel directly impacts how we're dealing with our children, our partners and spouses, as well as our parents. So if you've missed any of the beginning episodes, definitely go back and try to listen. Okay, today's truth is called Families Change. It's a heartfelt conversation about how motherhood evolves as our children grow and what I call the ache of learning to let go. We also talk about the sometimes difficult balancing act of navigating aging parents as well as mourning and loss. To help us explore this very big and very vulnerable topic is one of my absolute all-time favorites, Kelly Corrigan. Kelly has written 4 best-selling memoirs about family life. She's also the host of PBS's Tell Me More and her own podcast, which P.S. I absolutely love, called Kelly Corrigan Wonders. Kelly and I had a chance to sit down in person at Laughing Man Studios in New York City, which definitely made this episode extra special. So let's do this. Let's talk truth.
Where do women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond go to find solutions when their bodies begin to change? Womeness is the leading women's wellness brand, modernizing aging through education, inspiration, and clean solutions formulated to meet the needs of our changing bodies. Their best-selling Me.No.Pause supplement takes on perimenopause and menopause's toughest symptoms. You guys know these: hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, and so much more. Just 1 pill a day can help with more than 6 of these symptoms. Womeness is available nationwide at Ulta Beauty, Amazon, and on womaness.com. Get 20% off orders of $50 or more by heading to womaness.com/midlife and using the code midlife20 at checkout. Womaness, live fully and age well.
Let me just start off by saying thank you, for
You're welcome.
this.
You were literally impossible to say no to.
Oh, I know. I'm a little bit of a pit bull. I know. As someone who writes and wonders about vulnerable moments of change and also interviews so many experts and thought leaders, I'm curious about your perspective on the transition to midlife, either how you've observed it in others or how you experienced this new kind of middle place.
Just the other day, I was saying to my husband, Edward, that I felt like I had switched from the middle place to the neither place. So the middle place was the first book. It came out in 2008. My kids were very young, and it was the story of this one year that both my father and I had cancer. And for me, what it was really about was toggling between being someone's parent and being someone's child, and how in times of crisis you kind of want to lean back into that childhood way of being where someone else is responsible and somebody else has to make hard choices and somebody else is going to make breakfast and take the recycling out. But that life had moved on from that moment and that I was now someone's parent. And it was really about shifting my weight from this life as someone's child, which is something I really enjoyed. I had great parents, to being someone's parent. And both my kids are gone, and both my parents have died. Very recently, my mom died.
I'm sorry about your mom.
Thanks. And so I was kind of realizing that I had been in this envelope that I wasn't very aware of, actually. And then sort of looked around and thought, oh my God, there's nothing containing me anymore. I don't have, for instance, thinking about the holidays when you don't have parents, it's just a different proposition. And then thinking about the holidays when your kid has a job with very few days off, it's what could I do that would make it worth her taking one of her days off? She'd probably rather be with her friends, as I would have rather been with mine at her age. And so I do think that there's a stillness that comes into your life, and you have to sort of decide what to do with it, how to agitate it, if you will. And if you even want to, I feel like I have a tremendous amount of white space. And I really tried everything a girl could try to jam up my life with activity such that this wouldn't hurt so much. Both losing my parents, which I have always been keenly aware would happen, and losing my kids, which I was keenly aware would happen. So I had, this was a much anticipated moment in my life, and maybe it is for a lot of people, and maybe that's part of what makes it such a big deal, is that we have thought so much about what it would be to be a mother with people in your active daily care, and not that much about what happens after that part is over. But I can tell you that I knew that it would hurt like hell, and it did. All the things, all 4 of the changes hurt like hell. Losing my dad, losing my mom, losing my first kid, losing my second kid. There's so much good, and I have a very full life, and I have many projects that matter a lot to me. I'm writing, I'm podcasting, I have a PBS show, just did a TED Talk. I'm booked busy. Up for the rest of the year. Yeah. And it doesn't actually compensate for the loss. And I just want to underline that for people who feel like, oh, I should have had a career. I should have had more of a career so that this moment didn't feel so vacuous. It still feels super vacuous, even though I have had a career. Because you can't replace podcasting with talking to your kid every day, or being able to read them, their emotional state with your own eyes through your own observations of their body language and their tone of voice and their facial expression. Like, all of that goes away. You just don't have access to them anymore. So you don't really know how they're doing on any given day. And it starts to be less and less your business how they're doing on any given day. And making that shift in the cadence of your information about them, I'm finding is really quite challenging, because when someone lives in your house, you're just getting a constant stream of information. You may misinterpret it, but either they're eating or they're not eating, or they got out of bed easily or they didn't get out of bed easily, or they went for the run and they took the shower and they cleaned their room, or they didn't, or you found like Doritos on the floor and gummy bears in the bed. Like, there's just so much data. And then there's none.
I want to ask you a question. You've mentioned before about like redirecting the lens. You take pictures and you're a photographer, or I don't think that ever goes away. What does redirecting the lens for you mean?
Well, interestingly, I used to redirect it to my mom, because I thought, like, love the one who needs you. Like, if Georgia and Claire, my daughters who are 21 and 23, don't really need to talk to me that much, like, A, that's probably a good thing. And B, somebody else does, like your mom, or my cousin Lena, who's just had her second baby and has 2 stepsons. And, like, there are people in my life who I can love and support. I might not get to pick which ones they are. I would naturally want to give all of my emotional energy to my 2 kids. But if they're not available, like, could I give it to somebody else? And the person I was giving it to, I mean, in a very literal way, I would think, oh, I'd love to talk to Claire. And then I'd think, oh, just call Jamie, call your mom. And then she died a couple months ago. And so now I call other people, and
You can call me.
Sure. Hey, Julie. Hi, it's me. I just wanted to call Georgia. You said I could call you.
I'll be there.
So, yeah, I'm going to start calling podcast listeners and be like, hi, it's me.
They would love it.
Yeah, this is real time, whereas it's not recorded.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you can redirect your focus. And, of course, you could redirect it toward volunteering. Like, I found myself getting very pulled into Every Mother Counts, which is Christy Turlington's
I love her.
Amazing nonprofit that's trying to reduce maternal mortality here and around the world. And it totally grabbed me the more I learned about it. And so to redirect towards something like that, that's been helpful to me. But there's no minimizing that there's a singularity to these two kinds of relationships, being someone's kid and being someone's parent. And when those are reduced in frequency and intensity in your life, it's not a one-to-one on how you replace those units of emotional attachment.
So I'm going to read a question from Dr. Taz, who is my wing woman and co-host of this podcast, but couldn't be here. She absolutely loved your TED Talk, which for everyone listening is called Love is to be Brave. It's fantastic. We will include it in the show notes. It's really, really good.
Thanks.
And a little birdie told me that you're actually working on some stuff as an extension of that. So I think that's a really good use of time. So she's experiencing, Dr. Taz is experiencing herself and is witnessing in not all, but in many of her patients, is that life is busy. Right? Life is really active and there's a lot of energy around it. You got to go here and you got to go there and you have to do this and that. And everyone has, their own goals and, things that they want to get done. And you say in your TED Talk that family is a lot about holding space, but nobody really shows us or tells us how to do that. And so her question is really, how can we begin to cultivate a family culture of bravery, where it means to be present and not leave and to be a better listener.
It's kind of a mindset, isn't it? It's either like you're a human doing or you're a human being. And
we say that again, you're a human doing or a human being?
Yeah, like you're just either just blowing through your to-do list and that's your real pride and joy and that's your North Star, is like crossing everything off the list. Or you're available for what might come. And that's a totally different way of operating. It is to be very conscientious about what is allowed to end up on your to-do list. And then also having like a super to-do list or a meta to-do list, which is like, what am I doing here? Like, what are my absolute values that transcend this to-do list? Like, what should bump me off this list instantly? And so it's not unlike redirecting your gaze or changing the focus of your lens, which is to say, like, zoom out a little bit. Don't forget what matters to you. Don't accidentally decide through your actions or your budget or your schedule that you squandered your time with kids under your roof or with parents who are still alive by doing. Because there are certain conversations and connections and intimacies that can't happen in a rushed environment. And I think sometimes the people I feel the most sorry for are people who are in that sort of frantic, high frequency mode where they're just blowing and going. I just don't think, it almost to me looks like running. It looks like you might be running from something and that you don't want to be available. You don't want to see what's just going to happen. You want to make things happen. But I just don't think that the most important conversations of our lives are going to happen in a space like that. People know if you're putting out a I'm very busy vibe,
we're all busy in different ways,
but you're never going to get there with anybody. I mean, that's not an environment that is conducive.
And I think as we age, that's one of the wisdoms we gain is that wisdom of intentionality, of being more intentional. And
how much does it matter? I mean, how many stupid things that we have been letting take over our
100%.
lives.
And I have a very close friend who, her name is Lindsay, and she always says, when you say yes to something, you by default say no to something else.
Absolutely.
And when you say no to something, you actually say yes to something. You may not know what it is, but you are. And I think those are kind of words to live by. I want to switch gears to motherhood, which you've already talked a little bit about. And motherhood is such a huge topic when we talk about changing family dynamics. And I mean, especially for women in midlife. And it is undeniably the topic that gets most women just choked up because it's so raw. right? And at this time in midlife, when women are dealing with teenagers who are transitioning and seemingly not needing them as much anymore and kind of pushing them away, it just is, it's hard. And there's an ache that goes along with that. And I'm absolutely in that place right now. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. And so in terms of that ache of learning to let go, it's so ironic because we are also so aware of everything that we've invested in them and the time that we've spent for them, right? So that ache just becomes monumental. So I'm curious, about really what your own experience has been as a mom. You've been so open about how your motherhood has evolved over time. And I wonder if you could share with us what that's been like.
I had this running question for like a year, which is, what do we owe our children? And my brother-in-law, Mike, who's pretty brilliant actually in a lot of different ways, stunned me by saying, people were saying, I think you owe them like a dog. Like if they want a dog, you should get them a dog. And then someone else would say, I think you owe them time with their grandparents. And someone else would say, I think you owe them a look at religion or faith, an organized community of faith. And Mike said, I think you owe them privacy. And I was like, privacy? Like, I don't want to give them privacy. Like, I want to read their phones and find their journals and like overhear them in the car talking to their kids. Like, I just want as much information as I can get. And that was a jolt to my whole mindset. And I really believe that he's correct. I believe that the biggest shift in my thinking in the last couple of years is I used to be kind of hooked on the story of my daughters. So let's say that like something, there's always these little stories unfolding, like they're interviewing for a job, or they are going through sorority rush, or they have a crush on someone, or they're trying to withdraw from a class. All of those storylines have a beginning and a middle and an end. And sometimes if I get left in the middle, I think, I got to call Claire and find out how that job interview went. Or I got to call George and see if that date went well. And then I think, no, you don't. You don't need to know that. You don't need to know how every story ends. Like, that's not their job to keep you in the loop or to like close out every storyline with you. Like, get used to not knowing. It's okay that you can't really say, how are the girls? And I think it's a function of the way that people talk to each other, where if you go to a cocktail party with a bunch of people in midlife, everyone's saying, how are your kids? How are your kids? And then everyone answers with detail. And I always want to say, I don't know. I don't know. How do you know how your kids are doing? Do you know? Like, I've been caught off guard so many times now, thinking that they were great and they were absolutely terrible, or thinking that they were terrible and they were just fine. Like, they don't live in my house anymore. I can't tell you how they are.
Even if they are living in your house, you still don't know.
Of course, people have affairs. They sleep in the same bed with someone for 3 years. They don't even know.
I don't know how my daughter's doing, and she's 16. She's like probably lying in her bed right now getting bed rot.
Yeah.
Because does everything in that bed. Yeah. And I think she's okay. I hope she's okay, but I don't really know.
Right. So maybe the little suggestion that we could float to the world is, when people ask you how your kids are, unless you talk to them in the last like half an hour and you have actual information, just say, I don't know, because maybe we should stop this. I feel it as a certain kind of pressure, which is, gee, she really seems to know how her kids are, and so does she. And like, she had all kinds of things to say about her how her daughter was doing. Like, am I having a different experience, or do I know less? And then I think, no, they're just enjoying the performance of knowing. But the part of what the transition requires is to stop needing to know so much. You don't need to know how the job interview went. You really don't. You don't need to know if they rushed. You don't need to know what their grades are. You don't need to know if they're thinking about dropping out of some class.
Well, if I'm paying for the education, I do want to know what the grades are. There's a part of me, but that's just like the practical Nordic side of me, I think.
I never saw a report card. I never saw a high school report card. I never saw a college report card.
God bless you. That's amazing. Well done.
Part of it was because of password issues, where I signed into Schoolology one time, and I was like,
oh, Schoolology.
I don't know what my password is. Like, this is the one that needs to have special characters.
And I think because ultimately they have to figure out that they want it. They say that, and all the parenting, 101, they have to want it. You can't want it for them, but it's hard. I'm curious though. You said something about, I lost my train of thought. You said something about, at the cocktail party. People are always stunned when I say, can we talk about something else, anything else than our kids? Because I have like so much on my heart and my mind. I just want to, I think about those kids 24/7. And I spend so much time doing for them that I'm actually social right now. And I just want to talk about anything.
Because we owe them privacy. Let's say we agree on that. Then for sure, if we do happen to know something real about their lives, it is not appropriate to be talking about it at a cocktail party. And so maybe that's a part of the practice of transitioning, is to gracefully redirect the conversation to something else. Like, oh, they're great. Hey, did you see that huge protest outside of Citibank today? Like, that was crazy. There must have been 25 cops there. Like, you can move the conversation without, shaming somebody for having the instinct to mention it. You can just gently bump it over to a new topic.
So you said something, I brought it up earlier, but you did a recent podcast. I think it was in August. It was with Maya Shankar. It was called Going Deep on Empty Nesting. It was really an incredible conversation. It threw me to the floor. Again, I'm right there. So I'm right there. I sent it to my sister, threw her to the floor. She called me crying, and sent it to a bunch of friends, and they all texted me back. It was a lot to take in, because there was a provocative thought in there that stuck with me. It really stuck. And it was, can't get enough. I quote you, can't get enough, don't need a thing. I mean, you could write a whole book on that. And so I was wondering if for our listeners, you could explain what you meant by that, because there's power in that.
Can't get enough, don't need a thing. Which is to say, I will spend as much time with you as you're interested in spending with me. I will talk to you as long as you want to talk to me. I will meet you anywhere, anytime. But I don't need anything. It's all optional from here on out. And it's interesting that it struck you, because I'm not a terribly controversial person, generally speaking. But I did get quite a few emails from people saying, I thought that was terrible. I thought it was terrible that you would say, I don't need a thing. Like, kids need to be responsible with their parents. They need to be caring. They need to reciprocate. And I thought maybe we were splitting hairs, because of course that's what I hope for my children. I hope that they are, that they opt to care about me, and opt to want to be a part of my life, and opt to invest in our relationship. But I won't demand it. I will just make it clear that, like, I'm in for as much as you want, and otherwise off you go. And it's what was given to me. I grew up outside of Philadelphia in Villanova. I went to University of Richmond. I lived in Baltimore for a couple of years. I went traveling with my best friend, Tracy Tuttle, for a year. We went around the world. We were nannies and waitresses and bartenders. And we came back after a year, and I moved to California. And I didn't come back east for 29 years. And not one time did either of my parents guilt trip me. And my parents were not high flyers. They did not jump on planes for no reason. They were people who loved to save. And so when I left, it was not under the assumption that we were going to see each other 4 times a year. Don't worry about it. It was a big deal. It was a really big deal. We were saying maybe we'll see each other once a year. And I had a roommate whose parents really, really put it to her. She was also from the East Coast. And just at the end of every phone call, she was just furious because her parents would say stuff like, oh, well, you know, Sissy Lopheimer's kids were at the brunch on Sunday, but of course they live locally, you know, and Diana Mather's kids came for dinner on Tuesday, but I mean, they live locally. And, you know, they were just always kind of poking at it. And I thought, oh, my parents have never done that. They just let me go. Their baby, their only girl, 25 years old, knowing no one, put me in a Jeep, sent me across the country on 4 wheels. Well done. Can't get enough. Don't need a thing.
Well, I really appreciated the phrase for whatever that's worth. It has really made me think. My son is on a gap year right now. I put him on a plane and he's in Norway and before he goes to college next year. And it really shifted my mindset in terms of mindfully parenting this situation. And I really appreciated it. So I recognize that on the one shoulder, I can't get enough. I can't get enough of him. I can't get enough of my daughter. But on the other side, I also really don't want to be that person who is, you know, guilting them into anything or, you know, just nagging at them. You know, I want them to want to call me.
Yes. And also, I think in a perfect world, when they look at you and your life, they're not seeing lack, pain, emptiness. They're seeing somebody who is finding ways to flourish in each season of life. Like you're still, in the end, modeling. I mean, my mom modeled for me till the moment she died. I learned so much in the last 10 days of her life that will change the last 10 days of my life. And above all, as your family gets older and older, that's all you're doing. That's the sort of explicit advice phase fades away, and you're just modeling. And so, you know, you got to find your groove. You got to find a way to flourish in each stage, if for no other reason than to show them that we give birth to ourselves every day. We are not born once and for all on the day our mother gives birth to us, as Gabriel Garcia Marquez said, and I love that quote.
Since we're talking about the importance of friendship as we age, community is such a big part of that conversation too. Finding like-minded women to lean on during midlife can help all of us feel more connected and definitely less alone. Women-Us is one of my favorite go-to women-owned companies because they're all about encouraging women to embrace every chapter of life with grace and confidence. They're also about empowering women with not only products, but also valuable resources, content, and yes, community. They even created a private Facebook group called The After Party. It's an incredible private community sharing all things midlife for women who are 40 plus. So join the party by signing up on their website. And don't forget that Women-Us products are available nationwide at Ulta Beauty, Amazon, and on womenuss.com. So go check it out, and you're going to get 20% off orders of $50 or more by heading to womenuss.com/midlife and using the code midlife20. That's midlife20 at checkout. Women-Us, live fully, age well. I'm going to read something that you wrote. I think it was actually in the show notes from that episode, because I think our listeners will appreciate it. You said, finding empty nesting painful doesn't mean that you don't have big ideas of your own about how to spend time this final stage of life. It means you are clear-eyed enough to see something has ended and will not come again.
That's right.
Your word.
For me, that's the thing I wanted the most. I was not an ambitious young person. I did not have big eyes on some career. what I wanted the most, if you read my journals, I've been journaling since 7th grade. All I wanted was to lose weight, stop smoking. I mean, I was like the classic Bridget Jones.
Merit extra lights.
Yes, Merit ultralights. Thank you very much. Blue pack.
I was a Merit girl. I was Merit yellow.
Oh, you're crazy. It's like Marlboro Reds. I wanted to lose weight, quit smoking, and fall in love. That's what I wanted. And so that's what I imagined. And so when it was ending, like when we left Claire, our youngest, at UVA, we went into the parking lot and got into this van, that my friend Tracy Tuttle's van that I borrowed to get Claire to college because I still lived in California. And I cried so hard. Edward said, like, I've never seen you cry that hard. You didn't cry that hard when your father died. And I just knew. It was very obvious to me that, like, something was over. And it was the part I really wanted. And, you know, more surprises ahead, you know, and I do feel differently now. She's a senior now. She's a 4th year, as they say at Virginia. And I feel differently now. Like, I really am finding this stage kind of okay. And the growth is incredible. Like, the growth from 20 to 30, I think we underestimate it. I think we forget. Like, think about who you were when you were smoking Merit yellows at 20 and then who you were at 30. Like, that's just a huge growth spurt. And so to sort of sit back and watch your kids go through it, it's very exciting. And it's less, there's way less heavy lifting. It's more of just like, you know, pleasant surprises to see them get it. Like, Georgia came over last night. We live in New York half the year now, and she works here. And she came over after work yesterday in a dress. And Edward and I were just beside ourselves. We were like, look at you. And she's like, why are you staring at me? We were like, you look like a professional. She's like, I am a professional. I was like, yeah, but not really. I mean, you're just Georgia. Like, you didn't even know where your driver's license is. Yeah. Like, you lose your bank card like every other week. She's like, I'm not at work. I don't like.
Don't tell my boss.
Right. And I was like, you look so grown up. She's like, I am grown up. I'm like, wow. Hard to believe. So there's a lot of upside for sure. And I definitely have adjusted, but it's a lot to lose. It's a lot of change, a lot. And I just read North Woods, which is a really beautiful book by Daniel Mason. It's a novel and it's about a house over time. But at the very end, it says something like, I couldn't live another day if I didn't understand that I could change the story of life from a story of loss to a story of change. Again, I butchered that. So you should really take a minute to find it and plug in the proper.
I'm going to find it. Kelly says find it. I'm going to find it.
Please find it. Daniel Mason, I'm sorry to butcher your beautiful work. I loved
I'm going to find it.
Northwoods.
Okay, so we're going to move on and shift gears to aging parents.
Oh,
I know.
Are your parents alive?
My mom is. I lost my dad when I was in my 20s.
Oh, how awful.
Yeah, it was really hard. But my mom is a titan, so I got a good one left. Mom, if you're listening, it's for you. I see her aging though, and there's an ache that goes along with that too. And ironically, she lives in Pennsylvania. And, you know, on the one hand, I think a lot of the people that I've interviewed, a lot of the women in midlife that I've interviewed, they feel there's this kind of tug between, I really want my parents still to be my parents. You know, I miss and I long for someone who's also there just to unconditionally support me. And then on the other side of that, you know, there's this realization that this is all natural. And now all of a sudden I'm in situations where I'm the parent of my parent. And that's can be difficult. And there's a lot of emotion that can surround that. And so, you know, in talking to you, you have been so awake to your parents, and you have so appreciated them and all of their colors. It's so apparent in your work. And there's, you know, so much so there's a specific chapter in your book, The Middle Place, where you return home to your childhood home on Wooded Lane, and you walk through the kitchen and you look at and you see kind of a rusted frying pan, and you see chipped frames kind of askew on the sill, and mismatched towels, here and there, and pot holders that are like 10 years old that are stained. And you write, I want her, your mom, I want her to take better care of things, have higher standards, not be so old. And so I wonder if you could share with us what it was like to witness your parents age when you were, in that transition in midlife.
It's the opportunity is to find a state of acceptance. That's the mountaintop that you're gunning for. It involves your own concerns around mortality. It only goes one direction. You're going to die too. It might not be pretty. So it's just a whole set of hard thoughts that you were much too young to deal with in your 20s. But at 57 with my mom, I felt like I can do this. I can walk you out of the world. I can handle this. I can do a really good job by you. And I did. I did a really good job. And I loved doing it. I didn't have any. I was utterly unconfused on what I wanted. And I had a life that could allow for it. I don't have the kind of job where I can't just clear the decks and cancel everything, which was a real gift. And my kids were old enough. And I knew what she wanted. And I was able to help her get it. And those 10 days are like gold to me. I mean, I just learned so much. I changed so much, and I'm forever different. And she gave it to me. She did. She let me know what she wanted. She trusted me to help her. And then she said, at one point, she said, I feel sorry for you. You shouldn't have to be in here like this. And I said, oh my God. And this is the first chance I've ever really had to do anything for you. All this time, it's all about one way. Like, I finally have something I can do. Like, I'm thrilled. I'm so happy to be here. And then she said, well, what'd I do without you? And I said, you'll never have to find out. I won't leave. I will not leave this room. So now, let me say, it was basically a 10-day period. I mean, one of my best friends did it for 20 months. Everybody knows somebody who did it for 5 years, 7 years. Like, I feel so lucky at the actual way that it went down both times for both parents. It was not a heavy lift. I mean, there was no dementia. They lived in their house until almost the day they died, both of them. They weren't in terrible, terrible pain. They didn't have regrets. We didn't have relationship regrets. We didn't have unsaid things. It was fairly uncomplicated. It was just, like, at one point, my mom said, I'm ready, Kelly. And I burst into tears, and she said, I don't want you to cry. And I was like, well, I'm going to cry a little bit, but don't misinterpret it. I'm happy for you, and I'm not going to obstruct it. You deserve it. You deserve a beautiful ending. And she got it. Oh, thank you for sharing. Yep.
I want to backtrack, and there's two themes that come up with the interviews that I have with women. And one is guilt, the sense of guilt when we're in our 40s and 50s that we are not spending enough time with our parents, that we are, either physically or emotionally And then we're just not around. We're not doing enough. And so I wonder if you could speak to, if you have anything to offer folks on guilt.
I don't have a ton to offer except to say that one of my favorite questions is it true? Like, I would guess that there's probably a set of parents who wouldn't dream of saying, I can't get enough, I don't need a thing. There might be parents who are more prone to making their kids feel guilty. I didn't have, and neither of my parents were like that. They didn't put any pressure on any of us. There are three of us. I have two older brothers, and they never would have laid on a guilt trip. So I have a lot of sympathy for people who are in a dynamic like that wants to make them feel bad. And so I guess the one thing I would throw out is like, you have to have a conversation with yourself and say, like, is it true? Like, should you feel guilty? And then if you really decide that you're not like living in accordance with your values and how you want to treat them, then you make adjustments the best you can. But I mean, there are extenuating circumstances, like, there's just so much that needs tending to. If you have a marriage and you have children and then you have parents, like those are three people that really could lay claim on you and your time and your heart. And all that needs to somehow get balanced. My older brother's kids were in high school when my mom was dying, and they were really little when our father was dying. And so that's different. He has a different kind of job. He has clients that are super demanding, and they don't really care what's going on in your personal life. And then maybe also it's harder to be a man than it is to be a woman. Like, maybe when I was canceling everything, I was just telling people. And if I cried a little bit when I told them, I didn't really care. It's like, I'm just telling you, like I was supposed to give a graduation speech when my mom was dying. And I was like, I'm so sorry, but I don't know what's happening here, but it's quite possible that I'm not going to be able to do this. And then I was supposed to give some speech across the country, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And I'll tell you why. I don't mind telling you why. I don't feel like I want to cover that up. I want us all to be like human with each other. And if the same were happening for you, I would want you to tell me this is what's going on, so I know how kindly to treat you. And maybe in a man's world, you can't really do that. So I feel you on the guilt thing, but just make sure it's true. Either that they believe you are not showing up appropriately, and then do you believe it? Because maybe in the context of your relationship and your life and your other responsibilities, like, you're doing a pretty good job, but only you would say that. And that's like a huge, hard challenge to say, I know that my mom doesn't think I'm doing a good job, but knowing what I know, I believe that I am. Like, that's a hard discrepancy to just accept. And yet it's probably the best you can do.
So to zoom back out again around changing family dynamics, Dr. Taz had a question, which is, what do you think we're missing in terms of when it comes to parenting, being a mom or being a dad and learning to care for one another? What is the missing ingredient, do you think, that would make all the difference in the world and make our families more peaceful as we move forward?
Tell me more. What else go on? Like, I just don't think we're asking enough questions. I think we're leaping in with answers and fixes with a confidence that is unwarranted. I think that we should pull way back and be way more humble and try harder to surface the thing behind the thing behind the thing. And the way to do that is to say, tell me more. What else? Go on. It is not to jump in with your big solutions and clean it all up as fast as possible.
So that was like really a good segue for the next little bit, which is we're going to bring it back to the TED Talk. Again, everyone needs to go listen to it because it's really good. Again, it's called Love is to be Brave. And I want to read something, a quote from there, from Kelly's talk. And she says, "Bravery is the great guts to move closer to the wound, as composed as a war nurse holding eye contact and saying these 7 words. Tell me more, what else?" And go on. So kind of my last official question is to that effect, is what does brave mean, not only in terms of showing up for your family, but also the importance of showing up for ourselves, being more present with ourselves, listening to our inner voice so that we can honor ourselves as contributors to our family, but also honor ourselves as individuals.
I think the bravery that I was trying to understand and put voice to was people who are so sturdy and absorbent, if you will, porous, that you know that you can finally say the very worst thing. I steal. I hear voices. I think about suicide. I don't recognize anybody anymore. I forced myself on her. To be a person that another person can unburden themselves with. That's the bravery that I was trying to get at. And of course, these things that people are feeling and sometimes doing, we don't have any training or preparation for these moments. But what you're conveying with your posture and your facial expression and your silence is, I'm not afraid of what you're going to tell me. And so wouldn't it be so lovely to extend the same grace to ourselves, to say, like, I'm not afraid of admitting that I'm miserable today, or I hate my body, or I'm kind of lazy, or I talk a big game, but I don't actually do much in terms of forward motion, or sometimes I have to remind myself that it's the disease, it's not my dad. You know, like I've had friends say, like, they feel so horrible because they have moments of real disgust with a parent who is unwell in some way. Either they have that kind of angry dementia, or they're drooling or defecating or doing many of the other things that very old bodies do. And it's a turnoff. It's repulsive. It's repelling them. And I think to be the person that can absorb that and say, of course it is. Of course it is. It's horrible to clean your mom's bottom. That's a horrible thing to have to do. And you did. You did it. How wonderful. How amazing. How human. And then if you could, I suspect that ability to give it to someone else generates an ability to give it back to yourself too. Like, I have a feeling that you get what you give and you give what you get. So that if you are able to say, oh yeah, like someone I was just talking to has a father who's extremely agitated. He's old and he's agitated. He thinks about death constantly, and he's constantly working on the paperwork and safe deposit boxes and estate documentation, and so many doctors, just going to doctors all the time. And we had this sort of experimental thought, which was, what if you decided this is what this is going to be? This is what it's going to look like. He's going to be agitated till the day he dies. He's going to see 10 doctors a week. He's going to keep changing his documentation and having more lawyers look at it and whatever. And what if he just said like, yep, this is the way he's going to do it. And like, bless his heart. And I love him anyway. I still can't get enough. And instead of trying to alter him, to change him, to edit him a little bit, which I think is a fool's game. And I don't think it would be hard to realize that if you thought about how you might be and how weird it would be to have your children telling you what to do.
Well, that's just it, right? You've said in the past, be less judging, use less judgment and be more curious about your parents. And I think that there's a lot to that.
Yeah, just flow with them.
Yeah.
Just go the direction they're going.
Yeah.
If he wants to go back down to the bank and check the key, work some safe deposit box, just go with them. Like, that's what love looks like in that moment, is just doing it with them. And if, like, my mom would say, let's clean out the pantry. And it'd be like, oh, I'd rather play backgammon. But I think what love looks like in that moment is to be like, let's do it. Like, I'm going to go get a trash can and we're going to clean it out and just hold it up. You want the saltines? Nope. Great. You don't want the Ensure? No problem. How about these 49 plastic bags from the Acme? Get rid of them? Great. Oh, we're going to save this weird, like, half a box of penny pasta? That's fine. We're saving it. Like, could you just flow with them? Could that be exactly what love looks like in that moment? Maybe, I think.
That's generous. It's beautiful. I just wanted to kind of wrap the last thought in for the listeners, because what I hear so often is that women don't give themselves permission to be brave for themselves, and brave in the sense of, I really want to go back for that degree. I really want to follow that passion project. I really want to, get in shape, because they are shrouded in spending so much of themselves being brave for everyone around them. And so I think that there's a sense of encouragement around, being able to shine a light inward and being brave and saying, using your voice to say, this is what I need right now.
The bravery is actually trying to separate your voice from the voice of the culture or the community. So if you for sure really want that, by all means, you should do it. If you think you should want it, because that's what, like, your 5 best friends do, or that's what the American culture is telling you to do, and you find you're not doing it, it might be because you don't actually care about getting in shape. Or you don't really want the second job, or you don't really want to start a jewelry business. You just feel like you need to say something when people are having those kinds of conversations. So the bravery is saying, good for you. That's amazing. You're going to start a second business. Incredible. And then they say, what about you? What are you thinking? And you say, you know what? I have been puzzling. I do 1,000-piece puzzles. I do one a week. I love it. And I don't know, there's an art class I might do. Like, just to have the bravery to say, to claim your own space, to do whatever you want, because really that is the promise. That's the upside of these years, is that you actually should be able to finally and forever say, this is who I am, this is how I work, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and here's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. So I'm not going to let you go until we ask this last little question, which we ask everyone, which is, what is your midlife truth?
Jeez. That's not like a little question. Well, is that a little? Is that your idea of a little question?
Well, it could be
it's not that many words, but it's kind of like...
it could be one of them. Let's not put "the" in front of it. What is a midlife truth for you?
I'm free. I'm free. I might not want to be, but I am. And there's an upside to that I could start enjoying.
Wow. That was incredible. I just love the way Kelly describes her journey, her process, and how she thinks about family overall, whether it's about her children or the advice from her brother or losing her mom. She's just so incredibly generous with her feelings. There are so many nuggets that I'm going to take from this conversation, but here are just a few, Kelly Corrigan style. Number one, as our children grow up, the wild but somewhat game-changing mindset of never get enough but don't need a thing. Number two, instead of trying to change, alter, or edit our aging parents, how about just flowing with them, even if it means cleaning out the pantry? Number three, the one thing we can do for our children is to continue to model and show them that we can continue to flourish in each season of life. Thank you, Kelly Corrigan, for being part of this special series. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're looking forward to our next Midlife Truth, which is called Sex is Complicated, with the unbelievable, celebrated urologist, author, and podcast host, Dr. Kelly Casperson. See you soon.